This is All of It on WNYC. Welcome to our Get Lit with All of It Book Club live event here in the green space. Today we are talking about a classic novel, Little Women. But before we dive into discussing the book, we thought it would be helpful to learn a bit more about the woman behind the words, Louisa May Alcott. Because actually you can't get the full story of Little Women without knowing how much the characters, the March family home, and the specifics of their lives were drawn directly from Alcott's experiences growing up with her three sisters. But in many ways, Little Women is an idealized portrait of a real life and upbringing that was much more difficult than that of the March sisters. To tell us more about Louisa May Alcott and her family is Jan Turnquist, the executive director of the Louisa May Alcott Orchard House in Concord, Massachusetts. Jan was a consultant on the current film adaptation of Little Women, and we have to tell you about Jan. Jan was driving to New York from Concord, Massachusetts, got into a car accident. Everybody is fine. Car totaled. Is such a trooper that she is FaceTiming in from somewhere in Connecticut. She was determined to be on the show. Hi, Jan. Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
You can?
I could hear you perfectly. Suddenly it got softer, but...
Oh, okay. Well, I will get louder. First of all, are you okay? Everybody's okay?
Yeah, everybody's fine. I don't think the car was totaled either. It was just, we can't drive it right now, so we had to get a rental car, and a few other little things took time. But anyway, here we are.
Here we are. You are a trooper. Thank you so much for joining us, Jan. So let's ask a few questions of Jan. A lot of people might assume that Louisa May Alcott was like the March family and stayed in the family home throughout her life, but that's not the case at all. The Alcotts, they moved around quite a bit. Why did the family move so much, and when did they exactly live in the Orchard House?
Well, I'll start with the last part of your question. In 1857, a property of 12 acres with a wonderful apple orchard on it was available and purchased by Bronson Alcott, Louisa's father. All the buildings on the property, including the main house that you would see as you approach today, all the buildings were thrown in for free because they were in terrible condition, dating from the 1600s. So they were already a couple of centuries old. Now, they had moved around a great deal, mostly because Bronson Alcott, as an educator of young children, had ideas that were at least a century ahead of his time. When teachers felt that students should be hit regularly, if a boy's not bad now, he's about to be, just go ahead and strike. Here's Bronson Alcott refusing to do that at a time when teachers felt that children should not ask questions. They should sit there, simply be quiet until they're told to stand and recite the lesson and then sit down. Bronson encouraged questions. He encouraged field trips. He took the children out to figure out how to make a map instead of just memorizing map facts. He introduced a concept of recess. He was the first in Boston to allow a black child into his classroom, and she was a charity pupil. So the paying parents, who were some of them abolitionists, came and said, she goes or we take our children out, and we're the paying parents. And he said, she stays. So all of these kind of factors created reasons that the schools failed and he had to move. He also started a utopia at one point, which lasted 6.5 months, which was another difficult time. He was definitely an idealist.
How do we think his idealism and his sort of progressive sensibility influenced Louisa May Alcott's work?
Oh, it influenced Louisa and all of the family very much. For one thing, she wouldn't have been a writer. It was considered improper for a woman to have a desk of her own. Bronson built her a desk and gave her that sense of, yes, you can do this, it's fine. Even though physicians at that time were saying brain work, such as writing, will destroy a woman's health, her mother was the same way. She gave her a pen with a little verse, may this pen your muse inspire when wrapped in pure poetic fire. So these girls, all of them, had that sense of agency that was rare for people in general, certainly absolutely rare for women. And they all believed in votes for women, in equal rights. They were the kind of abolitionists who were actually believing that all humans are actually equal, when some abolitionists felt we should free the slaves, but let's not get carried away and think they're fully human. Here, the Olcott's were saying they are fully human. They are absolutely our equals in every way. So they were extraordinary in those ways. And the girls were right there with their parents in all of these ways.
Tell us a little about Orchard House. It sounds like it was quite idyllic, and they had quite a few well-known neighbors.
Oh, yes. Next door were the Hawthorns, Nathaniel Hawthorne and his family. Just a short distance down the road was Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau, who was a frequent visitor in their home. All of these people were frequent visitors in their homes, in their home. Orchard House. Orchard House, by the way, is where they lived the longest. They moved in after nearly a year of work to make that house livable. So in 1858, they moved in, and they were already there 10 years before Louisa wrote Little Women. So she was writing it in that house, and she set it in that house as well, because, as I like to say, if she wrote it the way they lived it, it would be called How to Move by Louisa May Alcott. And who would read that?
Our guest is Jan Turnquist. How did Louisa get the inspiration for Little Women?
Well, she had lived it. She and her sisters had lived it. I tell people that the heart of Little Women is true. She changed names. She changed time. She sometimes combined characters, but she was really writing about the lives they lived. She didn't put in everything, of course. She was giving the I guess you could say, the essence of what it was to grow up with sisters who were so important to each other. I think Louisa always hoped that they could remain in that very close bond forever. And to have one sister die and another sister marry was really devastating to her. But she wanted to recapture that, I believe, in some way. And I think Little Women helped her to do that.
Many people think that Louisa May was Jo. What do you think?
Absolutely. One thing Louisa said was, I based Jo March upon myself, but I didn't make her half bad enough.
What do we know about Louisa May Alcott's life post Little Women?
After Little Women, everything changed. One of the positives for her, of course, was an increase in financial security. She was able to pay off debts. She was able to really live in a very, very comfortable lifestyle. She became today what we would call a wealthy woman, and she was very generous, not only with her own family and friends, but sometimes with strangers as well. She was extraordinarily generous. But it also had a downside, because reporters would come and sit on the fence and sketch her when she was out walking in the garden. They would
early paparazzi?
I missed what you just
said. I said they're like early paparazzi, only with sketch pads.
Yes. Well, and this happened to Ralph Waldo Emerson as well. And then they would come right up to her door, knock on it, and ask for her autograph and want to see, oh, is this the house of the Little Women? I mean, it was really quite difficult for her in many ways. And sometimes she did escape and stay for a time at a hotel in Boston to be near her publisher, and I think to sort of have a little better measure of anonymity.
Like TMZ on top of it. They go right up to her door. Jan, you served as an advisor on the film Little Women, which is coming out on Christmas Day. What was something that you wanted to make sure that the film got right, that was accurate, that was really important to you?
Oh my, a lot of things. I want to start by saying that my impression of Greta and Amy and the cast and all the behind the scenes people as well, Jess Goncher, the production designer, all of them exuded desire to make the film accurate. And that was really at the top of my list, that it's as accurate as humanly possible, that you feel as if you could just step right into that world when you're in the movie theater, that you're not sitting back and sort of watching something take place. You're there with them. And even though it feels authentic, it feels real. These are people you could relate to and know. All of that is part of what we do at Orchard House. We give tours, but we feel that we are carrying on a spirit of the Alcotts and of course the Alcotts within Little Women, because they are the models for the marches. We feel that that is more important really even than the actual artifacts in the house, even though most of what you see in Orchard House really belong to them. People say, oh, it feels as if they just stepped out the door. All of that's wonderful, but it's wonderful because of who they were. And that's what I wanted to come through in this film. And I definitely think that they achieved that.
I understand we might be able to spot you in the film.
Well, there's a very funny aspect to that. I joked with people. I said, well, I imagine I'll be watching and I'll say, wait, that's my left elbow. It's almost that hard to spot me, but not quite. Really, if you know me and you know where to look, I definitely am there. However, the funniest part for me is really a memory, two different memories. One is when the wedding scene was taking place. I was in the gathering for the wedding. And we are told, anyone who's done background work for film will know they call you background for a reason. You are not to speak to the actors. You are to be unobtrusive when you're needed. You do exactly what you're told, and then you're really you disappear. So there was a little break in the action, and I was sitting on my little spot, just sitting, when suddenly Laura Dern spotted me from afar because I had had a lot of contact with all the actors and a lot with Laura. She had many, many questions about Marmee. So all of a sudden I hear Laura say, Jan, and she came leaping across. She's a very energetic person. Then that triggered all the sisters to come as well. And we had a wonderful little reunion there for a moment, but I was just for a split second thinking, oh no, I can't talk to them. I shouldn't. And then I thought, well, I think I could be excused to, you have to say hello. So that was a wonderful moment. And then the other thing that just was a delightful surprise, Jess Goncher, the production designer who wanted so many details about Orchard House, the room dimensions, floor plans, paint colors, everything, made a sign or had someone design the sign when they recreated 19th century Concord. The sign said, Madame J. Turnquist, dressmaker and milliner, 3rd floor. So I had some surprises that way. But the best part of it was really meeting the people, all of the people. They were absolutely wonderful.
And finally, I know you worked with Harney and Sons on this tea that we have in our lobby and that we are giving away via trivia. What can you tell us about it?
Well, when I first spoke with the Harneys, I was delighted that they wanted to be absolutely organic and they wanted to use a green tea as the base, but then put in real apple flavorings and chunks of apple because, of course, Orchard House is about an apple orchard. And they were wonderful to work with. They wanted us to design the tin, and they would, we would send things to them, and then they would send back their rendering of how it would go on the tin. We were back and forth multiple times, but they were absolutely in tune with the idea, again, of an authentic apple tea that would really do honor to the Alcotts and the Marches and this film.
Well, Jan Turnquist, you are a hero to be part of this tonight, given everything that's gone on today. We wish you and your family well. Thank you so much for being with us. Jan Turnquist, the executive director of the Louisa May Alcott's Orchard House in Concord, Massachusetts. Safe travels, Jan.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
All right, she a trooper or what? Oh my goodness. Okay, we are moving on. You want to do a pickup with that? Okay. That was Jan Turnquist of the Orchard House. We'll be right back with more of the Get Lit with All of It book club. Okay, part 2. By the way, Molly Burch is coming up later. She sounds great. This is going to be fun. Come on and have a seat, ladies. These are our experts. I will introduce them formally in a moment. And you guys are going to get a chance to ask questions too, so think of your questions. Okay, control room, are you ready? Okay, 3, 2. This is the Get Lit with All of It December Book Club live in the green space, and today we are discussing Little Women. So I think we should start with page 1. I'm going to read a little bit. Playing Pilgrims. Christmas won't be Christmas without any presents, grumbled Joe. It's so dreadful to be poor, sighed Meg, looking down at her old dress. I don't think it's fair for some girls to have lots of pretty things and other girls nothing at all, added little Amy with an injured sniff. We've got father and mother and each other anyhow, said Beth contentedly from her corner. And in just that exchange, we, the reader, learn so much about each of the March girls. The passage continues. The four young faces on which the firelight shone brightened at the cheerful words, but darkened again as Jo said sadly, "We haven't got father and shall not have him for a long time." She didn't say perhaps never, but each silently added it, thinking of father far away where the fighting was. That's the famous opening passage of Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, a novel that has stood the test of time and has become seen as a quintessential work of American literature. Since it was originally published around 150 years ago, Little Women has never gone out of print. It has been translated into Dutch and Japanese and Russian, among many other languages. It has inspired film and stage adaptations, including the recent movie directed by Greta Gerwig that's set to hit theaters on Christmas Day. Untold numbers of women and girls have grown up cherishing Louisa May Alcott's story of these four very different sisters, Meg, Amy, Beth, and Jo, struggling to determine what womanhood means for each of them. But think about 2019 with the rise of Gen Z feminism, Me Too reckoning, and more women than ever running for president. What does this 19th century tale of family, marriage, and friendship have to offer? Our next two guests argue emphatically a lot. Anne Boyd Rioux is a professor at the University of New Orleans and the author of the book Meg, Jo, Beth, Amy, The Story of Little Women and Why It Still Matters. And Kate Bolick is a New York Times bestselling author of the book Spinster and contributor to the book March Sisters of Life, Death, and Little Women. Both have spent a lot of time writing and thinking about Little Women, and they're here now to share their thoughts with us. Please welcome Anne and Kate. I want to ask both of you, we're sitting here 150 years after Little Women, putting together this whole event around this novel. There's got this big, hotly anticipated movie with all these sort of women who are just great actresses in their own right, and Greta Gerwig is the writer and the director. Why do you think Little Women has stood the test of time?
So should we just each answer that?
Yes, please.
So I think that one reason is because Alcott was writing at the beginning of modern consciousness, so all of the issues and forces that we live with today that were brought into being by the Industrial Revolution were part of what she was putting onto the page, and we still wrestle with all of these same concerns now. And so it can feel, even though the trappings are old-fashioned and different from what we're experiencing, the underlying emotions are very similar, and so it feels relevant.
What do you think, Anne?
I think, too, that each of the girls is so individualized and still feels very real. I think the passage that you read at the very beginning of the book, we hear each of their voices right on the very first page, and you can, when you read it now, you still hear those voices. It doesn't sound old-fashioned or quaint. They sound like real girls. And she created girls who have flaws, who complain, right? And at the time, that was unheard of, to have girl characters who were real and weren't stereotypical, weren't meant to represent the vices and virtues of their sex. They were just real people, and they were allowed to stumble and fall. And that, I think, is it still translates to today. I think these girls still feel real.
Yeah.
Kate, is it useful to ask the question, is Little Women a feminist book?
Oh, I mean, well, it absolutely is a feminist book. And I first read it when I was 9, so I didn't understand it was a feminist book then. Although I was, wearing little T-shirts that my mom put me in at the time that were like, a woman without a man is like a fish with like a bicycle, or a woman's place is in the house, ... and the Senate, So my mom was a feminist, and she was bringing that to me, but I did not understand that at 9. But rereading it as an adult, it was so exciting to read that feminist consciousness in these pages, and how much Alcott was working through ideas or just putting her own opinions, embedding them in the story is fun and subversive.
Right, and Alcott herself was an early feminist, right? And her ideas about the roles of women and their rights and their abilities and accomplishments and the role they have to play in the world, it just seeps into the book. I mean, it's inevitable. I mean, the fact that each of these girls, except for Beth, But particularly Jo and Amy, they go out into the world, right? They don't stay at home. This isn't just a domestic novel. They have adventures on the road. That's part of their coming of age, which is very unusual to see. The other thing that is particularly important, I think, in terms of thinking about it as a feminist book, is that she created a character, Jo March, who is an ambitious young writer and never feels ashamed about it. If you read 19th century literature, every depiction of a woman writer, whether it was written by a man or a woman, deals with this tremendous taboo against women raising their voices in public, and how guilty so many young women were made to feel for wanting to publish and see their name in print. And Jo never feels that, and her family never makes her feel that.
My guests are Anne Boyd Rioux, author of Meg, Jo, Beth, Amy, The Story of Little Women and Why It Still Matters, and Kate Bolick, one of the authors of the March Sisters on Life, Death, and Little Women. And you write, when Little Women first appeared, readers and reviewers were astonished by how new and original it was. There'd been nothing like it before, they felt, at least not for girls. You mentioned a little bit in your last answer, but what else made it new and original?
Well, the language really did. And I think it's important, if you read Little Women when you were young, if you read it 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, it may not be the same book that Louisa May Alcott wrote. Because in 1881, they came out with this sort of standardized edition of Little Women that became the one that was republished over many years. They published the 2 volumes together. It was originally published, 2 volumes were written separately. They published them together, they filled it with illustrations, and they made the girls a bit tamer. Their language was a bit more proper. They were described differently, everything. So if you read the original version, which is the version that you will see in the Library of America edition, or the Penguin Classic, or the Norton Critical edition, which is a great, that Norton Critical actually goes through all of the different variations between the 2 editions. But it was, the language was so fresh because the girls were speaking the way real girls actually talked then. And so there's a freshness to the language, kind of like Huck Finn, right? We see that dialect, that very American language. Well, this book was written 16 years earlier, and we see the girls talking that kind of colloquial, fresh language. In fact, British reviewers weren't very happy with that. They didn't think it was quite proper, which might be why they regularized it. Mm-hmm.
Economic anxiety is a big part of this book for the sisters. No matter how happy they were, Meg and Amy in particular seem to struggle with this idea that they don't have the kind of dresses they might like, or they might not present in the way that they would love to in wealthy society. Kate, why do you think the story would lose if they weren't wealthy?
Oh, that's fascinating. So what would the story lose if they weren't wealthy?
If they were wealthy.
If they were wealthy. Sorry, if they were wealthy.
Oh, yeah.
What would the story lose if they were wealthy?
God, it would not nearly feel as modern. And that's one of the reasons it feels so modern, is because they're talking about class mobility in a very personal way, the anxieties that we feel when we're suddenly given access to climbing into a different class through vocation or marriage or whatever that is. And that was happening in a more robust way because of the industry, like history's made. So that gave us access to different kinds of characters than we would historically see on the page.
Why do you think Alcott wanted to write about these women who were poor?
Because she lived it. Right?
Yeah, was what she knew.
Yeah, she said after writing the first half of the book and going back and reading it, she said, well, it's better than I thought it was. And she said, we actually lived most of this, right? So it really, there's a lot of her real experiences with poverty that don't make it into the book because they were much poorer than the March girls. They did not have a servant, for instance. The girls had to leave home to work. If you're interested in that aspect of, of young women having to make their way in the world as wage earners, you should read her book called Work. It's a novel she wrote that's a more adult book where she really describes a lot of her experiences out in the world, and it was rough. It was rough.
Let's talk about all the characters. Let's start with Jo. How many people think they're a Jo? I'm feeling like a Jo myself. Is Jo a heroine? What do you think? Yes, the audience yeah, move on, next question.
Is she the heroine, right? Because if you read through the book, each daughter gets her own chapter, but I think Jo, because Jo is Louisa is Jo, That's the kind of emotional center of the book, a lot of the struggles, but so I think that's why maybe a lot of us have felt drawn to her. Plus, she's articulating such modern ideas about wanting to be more than just a girl who stays at home and takes care of her family. And that has always resonated. It still resonates all over the world in places where women have far fewer opportunities than many of us have here. And so it's a book that there was a piece on NPR, This American Life, not too long ago, about a girl growing up, was it in Pakistan, who had to hide it under the covers, right? Because this was a subversive book. It does have subversive ideas in it about women's place in the world.
Kate, you described Jo as a tomboy who writes stories. Why did you choose the word tomboy?
Oh, just that was the word that we were using at the time when I was growing up. Is that not used now?
Just curious. Why?
Okay, yeah. I think that's how I thought of myself. Is that was a term.
Well, she says she wants to be a boy, right? She wishes she were a boy. I think it's really amazing that certainly one of the most popular literary heroines ever didn't even want to be a girl.
Yeah.
Right? What does that say about how much discomfort so many of us have felt about being girls, that we're so drawn to her?
Jo and Marmee seem to have a really special bond. What do you think is at the heart of that?
Is that well? I want to just listen to you.
Yeah, well, no. But I can speak to that in the sense that Jo or Louisa had a very close relationship with her mother because they were so much alike. And there's a really important, wonderful passage in the book where Jo is struggling with her anger. She's let Amy fall through the ice, and she tells Marmee, you don't understand what it's like, the struggles I have with my temper. And Marmee says, no, I do, because I have them too. I'm angry nearly every day of my life. And that is the bond between them, I think. They share this burden of having to struggle with their anger, because women aren't supposed to be angry, particularly mothers, right?
My guests are Anne Boyd Rioux and Kate Bolick. We're here live in the Green Space. We're talking about Little Women. So let's talk about Amy for a minute. Do you have the slide of what a friend sent me about Amy? She wrote, I'm almost finished and I haven't read it in about 25 years, but 100 pages before the end, I still hate Amy.
You love her or you hate her. There seems to be no in between.
She is polarizing. Why do you think Amy's polarizing, Kate?
Because she wants what she wants, and she's selfish and unapologetic about it, but also vain. So Jo is a more noble kind of selfishness that we can get behind, but Amy's kind of torn between worlds, where she wants to pursue her own ambitions, but she also wants to be rich and pretty. So she's kind of between Meg and Jo in a way.
Right, and I think a lot of women do identify with her because they feel that way too. They feel those ambitions, but they also like being girly, right? Yeah. And that's, I think, a potent combination that Amy represents. The problem, I think, for so many of us who lean more towards Jo is that Amy gets everything she wants. She's the winner at the end of the book. And she's the winner in life. This is how Louisa felt about her youngest sister, May. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which is an anagram for Amy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So in this, of course, one of the most heartbreaking scenes is when Jo breaks Laurie's heart. Mm-hmm. Laurie declares his love. Jo is not having it. We did an Instagram poll to see what our listeners thought of the decision whether Laurie should have married Amy or Jo, and it was split 50-50.
Oh, wow.
What do you think about Laurie's marriage to Amy instead of Jo?
What kind of reactions have you found about that?
Well, what do you think about Laurie and Amy getting married?
Well, I think it's weird.
It's weird.
Yeah.
Most people think it's weird. Yeah. It feels a bit forced.
Yeah.
Maybe in a way, because she. Alcott said she swore she wouldn't marry Jo to Laurie to please anyone, because that's what her readers wanted. Because remember, she published the first half, and then it was so popular, and she's getting letters from readers, and all these girls are saying, "Oh, who do the girls marry? I hope Jo marries Laurie." And she hated that idea because they were friends, right? They were like brother and sister. They had this platonic relationship, and so it becomes kind of this interesting yeah, kind of a strange ending. But I think I've noticed that when we're younger, we feel sometimes more upset about Jo not marrying Laurie. And as we get older, we kind of realize, yeah, maybe Bear was better for her than Laurie.
Oh yeah, it felt so romantic to me now, reading it as an adult, and that Professor Bear feels like, to me, that what Alcott was inventing as the man of her dreams.
Yes,
was this character.
He's a big teddy bear, right? She describes him as a warm fire. There's no, hot, steamy, passion there. He's a cozy, comfortable guy who kids love him. And so she's drawn to him in a different way than maybe a lot of her readers have wanted her to be drawn to someone.
Right. Kate, you've written a pretty extensive essay about Meg. Why did you choose Meg?
Well, honestly, the reason I chose Meg was because when the Library of America asked if I wanted to do this book, I thought, to contribute an essay, I thought, absolutely yes. I can't wait to reread this book and think about it as an adult. And so I don't know who else is contributing to the book, but somebody else is going to get Jo, I bet. It'll be like whoever's the most famous gets to choose, and they'll choose Jo. So if I don't get to choose, who would I want to write about? And I would want to write about Meg because she seemed like a way for me as an adult to explore Alcott's life as a spinster through the decision, because Meg's the one who's most interested in marriage. And so how did Alcott feel about that as a writer, and how did she treat that topic? So I wanted to investigate Meg through that lens. And then when I reread the book, it totally surprised me to instead be ensorcelled by Meg's relationship to her own vanity and her own desire for beautiful things and her own discomfort the first time she gets dressed up and feels beautiful. And that felt so much more electric and interesting to me to write about. So that's what I ended up writing about.
Let's talk about Beth. She feels saintly and selfless, and but she seems to want to make people around her, or people want to be better around her. And then, of course, we lose her. Is she I don't know if this is too much of an extent, is she a Christ-like figure in this book? Is that her role?
She's idealized because Louisa did lose her sister Lizzie. And people, after they passed, do tend to take on idealized dimensions, right? But I think that Beth is a really important figure in the book. She's kind of overlooked. In some ways, she seems like a catalyst for Jo's development because Jo changes after she dies. And it does feel like Jo's story in many ways. But I think her path is a really tragic one, and one that we should look at and think about, because she tells Jo when she's dying, it's like she's given up. She says, I've never imagined myself growing up the way the rest of you have. She couldn't envision herself into the future as a little woman. And in some ways, she stays a girl. She almost, dare I say, chooses to not grow into womanhood.
My guests are Anne Boyd Rioux and Kate Bolick. We're talking about Little Women live in the Green Space. This is the Get Lit with All of It book club. We'll be right back. Three, two. This is All of It on WNYC. We are live in the Green Space. This is the Get Lit with All of It book club. My guests are Anne Boyd Rioux and Kate Bolick. Of course, we're talking about Little Women. Now, you've each chosen a passage to read that's important to you. Kate, you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. So this is an excerpt from the passage where Meg goes to spend a fortnight with her rich friends, the Moffats, and gets dressed up. And this was what was so electric to me when I reread it as an adult and realized that I had experienced the same thing in my early 30s when I moved to New York City and suddenly everything changed. So I was a lot older than Meg, but I went through this a little later. And so this is just the description of, so the Moffats have discovered that Meg only has her one dress to wear to the next ball, and they offer to dress her up in their clothes. And so it's on the Thursday evening, Belle shut herself up with her maid, and between them, they turned Meg into a fine lady. They crimped and curled her hair. They polished her neck and arms with some fragrant powder, touched her lips with coralline salve to make them redder, and Hortense would have added a soupçon of rouge if Meg had not rebelled. They laced her into a sky blue dress, which was so tight she could hardly breathe, and so low in the neck that modest Meg blushed at herself in the mirror. A set of silver filigree was added, bracelets, necklace, brooch, and even earrings, for Hortense tied them on with a bit of pink silk, which did not show. A cluster of 10 rosebuds at the bosom and a ruche reconciled Meg to the display of her pretty white shoulders, and a pair of high-heeled blue silk boots satisfied the last wish of her heart. A lace handkerchief, a plummy fan, and a bouquet in a silver holder finished her off. And Miss Bell surveyed her with the satisfaction of a little girl with a newly dressed doll. "Mademoiselle is charmante, très jolie, is she not?" cried Hortense, clasping her hands in an affected rapture. "Come and show yourself," said Miss Bell, leading the way to the room where the others were waiting. As Meg went rustling after, with her long skirts trailing, her earrings tinkling, her curls waving, and her heart beating, she felt as if her fun had really begun at last, for the mirror had plainly told her that she was a little beauty. Her friends repeated the pleasing phrase enthusiastically, and for several minutes she stood like the jackdaw in the fable, enjoying her borrowed plumes, while the rest chattered like a party of magpies. Oh my God, I have chills reading that, because that part, like, standing like the jackdaw in the fable. And so like we're about to see, she's about to be humiliated by Laurie. He shames her. And it's like, what's up? You don't look like you. You look all fancy. I don't like that. And she's like, totally embarrassed and just wished that she'd worn her regular old frock. And of course, Laurie can do this. He has all this privilege. He has no idea what she's experiencing. But Alcott's setting us up for that with the jackdaw. So the jackdaw was a guy, he was a bird, he was a crow who wanted to be like a beautiful peacock. So he collected all their feathers and stuck them in his tail and pranced around like a peacock. But everyone knew he was just a crow. So that's what Meg was being, yeah.
It's such a good passage, because I think any young woman growing up has had some moment like this, right? That is one of the passages that still feels so relevant, right? It's not dated at all. The trappings might be a bit different. We're not lacing ourselves up in corsets, but we're cramming ourselves into our skinny jeans or whatever, right?
Yeah. And then we're seeing ourselves in the mirror, we're seeing ourselves on Instagram, all of these avatar selves. It's just multiplied, but it starts there. And Meg had, she could have been looking at fashion magazines. Those were being printed at the time with illustrations of dresses. And so that's what, when she afterwards, she confesses to Marmee, I dressed up. I was like a fashion plate, so she's enacting that reading of magazines, that beauty culture that we've all grown up with and been permeated with, just TVs and films and blah, 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 blah. Like, it's just beginning right there, but just with gentle illustrations, but still so aspirational and tormenting.
Yeah. And she drinks champagne and gets a little tipsy.
Yes, yeah. It's quite a night.
Doesn't feel so good the next
day.
And what passage did you pick?
Well, I picked a passage about Jo that gets overlooked, and I think it's really important to remember that Jo does not give up her literary aspirations. She burns up her thriller stories that Professor Bear suspects she's writing, and kind of makes her feel a little bit, ashamed of having written those. And she goes home and is with Beth, and Beth dies, right? And after Beth dies, she's struggling. Now, if she had been the heroine of a moral storybook, she ought at this period of her life to have become quite saintly, renounced the world, and gone about doing good in a mortified bonnet with tracts in her pocket. But you see, Jo wasn't a heroine. She was only a struggling human girl like hundreds of others. What could be harder for a restless, ambitious girl than to give up her own hopes, plans, and desires and cheerfully live for others? She's taking care of her parents now, like Beth did. "Why don't you write? That always used to make you happy," said her mother once when the desponding fit overshadowed Jo. "Write something for us, and never mind the rest of the world. Try it, dear. I'm sure it would do you good, and please us very much." An hour afterward, her mother peeped in, and there she was, scratching away, with her black pinafore on and an absorbed expression. Jo never knew how it happened, but something got into that story that went straight to the hearts of those who read it. Letters from several persons whose praise was honor followed the appearance of the little story. Newspapers copied it, and strangers as well as friends admired it. Her father told her, "There is truth in it, Jo. That's the secret. Humor and pathos make it alive, and you have found your style at last," as Alcott did with this book. "You wrote with no thought of fame or money. You put your heart into it, my daughter. You've had the bitter, now comes the sweet. Do your best and grow as happy as we are in your success." So she becomes a successful writer in this book, and people forget that. And she does it all on her own without Professor Bear. Forget the movies, the way the movies have portrayed it. Professor Bear has nothing to do with it. And then in the final chapter, Amy asks her, "Do you remember our castles in the air?" Right? So many readers have been disappointed that Jo seems to give up her writing and marries Professor Bear and opens the Plumfield School. And Jo says at the end of the book, "Yes, I remember, but the life I wanted then seems selfish, lonely, and cold to me now. But I haven't given up the hope that I may write a good book yet. But I can wait, and I'm sure it will be all the better for such experiences and illustrations as these." And Jo pointed from the lively lads in the distance to her father, leaning on the professor's arm, and then to her mother, sitting enthroned among her daughters with her children in her lap and at her feet. That line blew me away the first time I read the book. And I wasn't 9 years old. I was in my early 20s. I was in graduate school. And that seems a little old to read the book and have it be meaningful to you, but it really was. And this was the passage that stood out to me, because Jo is saying at the end, "I've become a mother and a wife, but I can still be a writer too. And maybe I'll be a better writer. Maybe my book will be better because of these experiences I'm having." That was a revelation to me. I've never heard anybody say that before. It was either one or the other, right? Mm-hmm. You have to, and if you try to do both, they each suffer for it. But she, I think, sort of left open this possibility that the writing would be richer for her experiences and not poorer.
Let's get some microphones out into the audience and get some questions or comments. My guests are Anne Boyd Rioux and Kate Bolick. We're talking Little Women, of course. Anybody have a comment or a question? Jordan, we have two people over here, and we'll have a nice lady down front.
Hi. Hi. I just had the opportunity to rewatch a movie called To Walk Invisible, which was about the Bronte sisters. Mm-hmm. And I've actually been to Haworth and been to the parsonage and had that incredible feeling of seeing, their things. How much influence do you think the Bronte sisters had on Louisa May Alcott? Because there are some very similar parallels in their experience. They also lost a sister. They lost a brother. They lived very Spartan lives, and that movie in particular really showed it in a very realistic way. My mother was from the north of England, and there's a very distinctive accent, upstairs, mother, so we think of the Brontes sometimes as their characters would be very elegant, and they didn't. They had very provincial accents, and I imagine the March sisters did too, not the fictional March sisters, but the Alcotts. What do you think about their influence on her writing?
Well, Charlotte Bronte had a big impact on her writing. In fact, her first novel was a novel for adults called Moods. It was published in 1862. And Charlotte Bronte and Emily, too, are all over that book. You see it more vividly. And scholars have written entire books about the relationships between the Brontes and the Alcotts, or at least the way Louisa drew on their example. And I know Charlotte Bronte was, there weren't many famous women writers, right? So she really stood out as she was a genius, right? She had been given that kind of hallowed, identity, and so Louisa really looked up to her, and her influence is definitely all over her work. Mm-hmm.
Right here, right, Jordan?
I was very interested seeing very few references to, I haven't finished your book, I just bought Meg, Jo, Beth, Amy on Sunday, but I read Little Women. I started reading Alcott at 8 with 8 cousins, and read Little Women at 9, reread it frequently, and I think I've read just about every other word she's ever written, she wrote.
Great.
And so I was interested in, I went through your index, and I didn't see abolitionist, I didn't see the word slavery, I didn't see a reference to Asia the Black Cook in Little Men. I didn't see a reference to the Merry Little Quadroon who had the sweetest voice of all in the last chapter.
I do mention him.
Well, he
but
wasn't in
you're
the
right,
index.
Okay.
So finally I saw a reference to Anne Petrie. And I was wondering if you were going to acknowledge that women who were not white, like me,
Right.
middle class little black girls and I
Yes.
and my friends, all of us acted out Little Women in crepe paper skirts
Yes.
made by our mothers because we insisted upon it. So because we wanted long skirts. And I just wondered, and I do see that you give a paragraph, and you also mention Margot Jefferson, who also mentions
Right.
Little
She talks
Women
about it
as
quite
a
a bit.
formative book. So I do think that it is important that that be acknowledged, that women all over the world and women in this country who did not look like Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy also appreciated them.
Yes, and I do acknowledge that, and as well as in the Penguin edition that I edited of Little Women as well, because it has, I think it was an extremely important book. Coretta Scott King writes about how important the book was to her, and I think there weren't many books for girls of color growing up, right? For so many years. I mean, we have a kind of, flourishing of them now, but, there's been a concerted effort, but for many years there weren't. And Little Women was one that spoke across class and race lines. I think because they were poor, because they weren't held up as so exemplary, they felt so real, right?
Because she was a writer.
Yes, and because she was a writer,
Because she
yes.
was a writer. That's why Jo was important to me. And that's
Right,
why
right,
I became one, but that's one of the reasons I
right.
became one.
I think it's also important to note that with this model of 4 sisters, Louisa May Alcott invented a template that has gone on to be used so most recently we have the Golden Girls, Living Single, Girls, the television
Trip.
show.
and the
Sex and the City. Yeah. So this idea of
I
taking
might get booed, but the Kardashians.
So you
Waiting
take
to Exhale is another one.
Yeah,
That's,
so you take 4 girls and the way that they can speak to the multifaceted, aliveness of the female experience, and I think that helps it be a cross-racial thing as well, because it's talking about being what it is to be a girl in these different ways, and you can imagine yourself into the different experiences, no matter who you are or no matter what age you are, and that's part of why the book is so long-lasting, is that you can return to it and relate to different sisters at different parts in your life.
Let's get one more question in down here, or maybe 2. I don't know. This young woman had her hand up first. Oh, she didn't? All right. Sorry. That's why I saw it first.
Hi, you guys touched on feminism and how this book has really had an impact on feminism, but I was just wondering if, we've talked about Jo a little bit, but the other characters, what can somebody, I guess, my age gather from the other characters that kind of can propel feminism forward?
The other feminist aspects of the other characters.
Well, it depends on how you define feminism, right? If we talk about feminism in the sense that women can choose their identities, right? The fact that these 4 girls are so different and they're allowed to develop individually and to follow their own path and to develop their own talents too, because each of the girls has its different talent. Meg Anna was her sister that Meg was based on. She was an actress, and so you see a bit of that in the book, but it was kind of scandalous to be an actress, so she didn't develop that too much in the book. But Anna loved to act. Meg loved to act. Jo was a writer, obviously. Beth was a musician. She played the piano, and Amy was an artist. I mean, that's, I think, still difficult for young women to feel that they can own their talents.
And then there's also the just the experience of reading something that was written so long ago and feeling the feminist consciousness on the page. And that is helpful in terms of just giving you a more textured understanding of the long reach of feminist consciousness and how Alcott, it's like, it's a world without men. It's 4 sisters and a mother. The dad's away at war. Alcott puts on, there are all these little things dropped in, nunneries, witches. Like, there's the kind of, the whole history of female experience she's sort of dropping. And then also her ambivalent relationship to the idea of marriage is really in the book as well. And that's something that still feels relevant also. So it's the way that consciousness comes through.
Right. And I think it's so important that this is a book about girls' experiences, women's experiences. They're at the center of the book. The men are on the margins, right? Laurie's on the outside looking in through the window and being intrigued by this world and wanting to enter into it. And that is not something that we see very often in literature, particularly the literature that is being taught in high schools and even at the college level. To give these girls center stage is a very, I think, progressive feminist thing to do as well.
Yeah.
My guests have been Anne Boyd Rioux and Kate Bolick. We've been discussing Little Women. Ladies, thank you so much, for being with us.
Really fun.
We'll have more all of it after the break. Okay, we're going to take a break. Thank you so much. We're going to do a little trivia while Molly sets up. Get ready for something great. All right. We have our trivia question for more of the Harney tea. Ready? It is the 25th anniversary of the 94 movie version of Little Women. If you get 2 out of 3 to win a tin of the Harney tea, Harney and Sons, who played Jo, Laurie, or Mrs. March in the 94 movie? Nobody gets to Google. You guys decide. I can't decide.
Hi. Winona Ryder played Jo.
Okay.
And Susan Sarandon played Marmee.
Correct. There you go, Simon. Can you pass it down? Anybody know who played Laurie? It's weird.
Yeah. It's a very
A hint. Okay. Do you know?
Christian Bale.
Christian Bale. You gotta look that one up. Okay. We'll have one more chance at trivia in a minute. Let's get set up. Let me get out of the way for Molly. Okay. All right. Hey, control room, does Molly want to come out and get ready, and we'll just go from there? Okay, great. This is Molly Burch, everybody. Good? Okay, I can almost have the rest of my mead now. It really did make me a little warm and fuzzy there at the top. Okay, here we go. You guys ready? I'm going to go in 3, 2. Welcome back to the Get Lit with All of It Book Club, live from the Green Space. Our musical guest tonight has a real holiday treat for you. Molly Burch is an Austin-based singer whose songs have been described as vibrant and warm and quietly incisive. Her debut album, Please Be Mine, came out in 2017. It made it onto a number of best of album lists of that year. Pace Magazine also named Burch one of the year's top 10 new artists. On her 3rd album, which she released last month, Burch brings all that vibrance and warmth to a kind of album that's become a rite of passage for musicians, a holiday album. The Molly Burch Christmas album has classics like Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas, Auld Lang Syne, and even a very funny cover of Last Christmas, plus 2 original songs written by Burch. Molly Burch is here with us now to get us in the holiday spirit. Take it away, Molly.
Thank you.
Yourself a merry little Christmas. Let your heart be light. From now on, our troubles will be out of sight. Yourself a merry little Christmas, like the Yuletide gay. From now on, our troubles will be miles away. Golden days of yore, faithful friends who are near to us, gather near to us once more. Through the years we all will be together as the fates allow. Hang a shining star upon the highest bough. So have yourself a merry little Christmas.
Molly Burch, everybody. So 3 albums in 3 years. Sometimes people take a break, Molly. Why did you keep going?
This album, this holiday album, didn't feel the same as producing your own original album. It a lot of the kind of stress and anxiety that goes into writing a full album wasn't there because it's a covers album, and it was a lot of fun. So it didn't feel like, not to say that putting out your own album isn't fun, but there was a lot of, it just was a really lighthearted project that it almost felt like a break, even though I was working hard on it.
How did you decide which songs? There are so many great holiday songs.
Yes. Well, I didn't want to cover songs that have been covered many, many times, which is really difficult to find when you're making a Christmas album, because there have been so many. But that was my goal when I was researching songs. I wanted to have songs like Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas that people know and love, and to have songs that maybe you've never heard before. So I hope there's like a healthy balance between the two.
And you have a couple of originals.
Yeah.
when you sit down and try to write a Christmas song or a holiday song, what are those challenges?
Well, I procrastinated a lot because it was really daunting, and I was really nervous that I didn't want it to sound cheesy or, I don't know. It took me a while, but once I got into it and just wrote like how I write and my style of writing, I just tried to focus on that and add a little sprinkle of holiday cheer in there. Yeah.
When did you make it? How long did it take you? What were the recording circumstances?
It's been this whole year. Like, we decided last Christmas. So we decided to do it last Christmas, and I got to work immediately with listening and making playlists and asking people what they wanted to hear. I wanted the album to be relatable to a lot of people. I wanted people that love Christmas music to like it, and people who don't love Christmas music to like it, and it's just hard. But yeah, and then we recorded it in Austin, where I live, in the spring, and we decorated the studio and
you went all out.
Christmas. Yeah, it's really fun. And then I was also simultaneously touring my second album, but even on tour, I was like gathering Christmas decorations for the cover and just always thinking about it. It's been, we've really been working on it for the whole year, and it's been fun. Yeah.
You're going to be on the road through a lot of 2020. I looked at your tour dates all over. Mm-hmm. Is that going to be in support of your past two albums, or do you have another one sort of waiting to be released into the world?
It's still in support of my past two albums, but I'm working on new music, but I'm not putting out an album this year. It won't be 4 albums in 4 years.
Can you write on the road?
No.
You can't?
No, I need to be home, yeah.
You're going to come back in this area. I think you're going to be in Philly in sometime in April. Is it going to be this setup when you go out on the road? Is it
Actually, yeah. We are going to do, I usually tour with a 5-piece band, but that tour, it's going to be a trio with these guys. Yeah.
Will you introduce these guys to our audience?
Yeah, this is Tom Washburn on drums.
Hi, Tom.
And this is Daley Tolliver on the piano.
Will you play us out for the rest of the evening? A couple more songs?
Thank you so much for having us.
So thank you so much for coming on down. Molly Burch.
This is a Dolly Parton cover.
Hey, maybe I'll dye my hair. Maybe I'll move somewhere. Maybe I'll get a car. Maybe I'll drive so far that I'll lose track. Me, I'll bounce right back. Maybe I'll sleep real late. Maybe I'll gain some weight. Maybe I'll clear my junk. Maybe I'll just get drunk on apple wine. Me, I'll be just fine and dandy. Lord, it's like a hard candy Christmas. I'm barely getting through tomorrow, but still maybe I'll learn to sew. Maybe I'll just lay low. Maybe I'll hit the bars. Maybe I'll count the stars until the dawn. Me, I will go on. Maybe I'll settle down. Maybe I'll just leave town. Maybe I'll have some fun. Maybe I'll meet someone and make him mine. Me, I'll be just fine and dandy. Lord, it's like a hard candy Christmas. I'm barely getting through tomorrow, but still I won't let sorrow bring me right down. I'll be fine and dandy. Lord, it's like a hard candy Christmas. I'm barely getting through tomorrow, but still I won't let sorrow bring me right down. I'll be fine and dandy. Lord, it's like a hard candy Christmas. I'm barely getting through tomorrow, but still I won't let sorrow bring me right down. Oh, I'll be fine. I'll be fine. Oh, I'll be fine.
Thank you so much. This next song we're going to play is one of the songs that I wrote for the album. It's called New Year Love. I don't need much, not much at all, but it's getting so cold outside, and I need someone to keep me warm. A hand to hold, a love that's mine. 'Cause I spent Christmas alone this year, and I want that to be the last time. When I think of all the things in this world I could buy, there's nothing I want more than you. I'm not lying. Won't you be mine, baby, this year? I'll treat you like I never treat no one. Won't you be my New Year love? I've started to believe again. I've stopped falling apart. Christmas spirit is alive again. Yeah, it's in my heart. I feel so young again. Oh, because
you brand new. When I think of all the things in this world I could buy, there's nothing I want more than you. I'm not lying. Won't you be mine, baby, this year? I'll treat you like I never treat no one. Won't you be my new year love? My new year love. My new year love. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Molly Burch, thank you so much. Also, thank you to Kate Bolick, Anne Boyd Rioux, Jen Turnquist, and of course you, the audience. Thank you for coming out for our Get With All Book Club. Happy holidays, everybody. Be good and be safe, and come visit us next time. Thanks, everybody. All right, people in the room, we have one more trivia question. That was for the radio people. All right. What was one of Alcott's pen names? Oh, the lady in the front, she's a ringer. Okay.
A.M. Bernard.
Yes, ma'am. I bow to you. We've got all kinds of books in the lobby for sale. We hope you'll definitely come back out in January. As you can tell, these things are a lot of fun. Thank you so much for coming out. I know it's a tough night. Happy holidays, everybody. Thank you so much. Oh, also, there's Molly Burch merch as well, so you can enjoy the holidays.